Are we live? So we got all ready to go, and then the internet failed. We've managed to delete it by accident. All of it. It's like, oh, well, our reach is omnipotent as some of our constituents think. So great, excellent. Welcome everybody to the Development Plan panel. My name is Councillor Neil Walshaw. I'm the chair of the panel. So, got a bit of a preamble to do as per normal in these COVID regulated times. So I'll just quickly run through that, and we'll do some introductions, folks, and then we'll go through our agenda for today. So we're holding this meeting in a way that's COVID secure and in accordance with social distancing guidelines, that everyone is presently sat an adequate distance apart and has been allocated a specific seat. The 90-minute rule has been removed, but we try to be reasonably concise on this panel. So I think if we aim for 90 minutes, that would be fantastic. It's an interesting agenda today, but I think we've covered a lot of this before, and it's an update and a refresh. And then afterwards, after the meeting formal proper, we've got a workshop on session. So we won't be web broadcasting that. That's a workshop for members. So what we'll do, we'll do some introduction. So as I've said, I'm Councillor Neil Walshaw, Headingley and Hyde Park Ward, and I chair the Development Plan panel and the Climate Emergency Advisory Committee, and I'm your chair for this afternoon. So we'll go around and do introductions. So we'll go to my left. So we'll start with Councillor Carlisle.
Hello everyone, Councillor Peter Carlisle from Calvin Farsley Ward. I'm here as a substitute for Councillor McKenna today.
Hello, my name is Councillor Caroline Grew and I represent Bramley and Stanningley.
Good afternoon, Councillor Kaylee Brooks, Little London and Woodhouse Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Helen Hayden, Temple Newson Ward and Exec Member for Infrastructure and Climate.
Good afternoon, David Feeney, Chief Planning Officer for Leeds.
Good afternoon, Ian Mackay, Team Leader, Neighbourhood Planning and Engagement.
Sarah Halliwell, Principal Planner, Policy and Plans Group.
Afternoon, Nicole Walker, Legal Advisor to the panel.
Good afternoon, Councillor Dawn Collins, Horsforth Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Barry Anderson, Adeline Wharfdale Ward.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Alan Lamb for Wetherby Ward.
Hello, Martin Elliott, Head of Strategic Planning.
Thanks, folks. And we've got apologies from Councillor McKenna and Councillor Taylor, and Councillor Campbell's potentially sending his apologies. He's got some matters to attend to. So great. Okay. Whew. I'm very warm at the front, folks. So patient observers will note that our cameras are not working entirely correctly today. So all we've got, although everyone's audio will be heard, all we've got is a distance shot that you can see at the moment on the monitors. I mean, some would argue that it's for the best. Some would argue it's for the best. So, you know, if you've been prepping for your close-ups, I'm afraid it's not this meeting. I'm really sorry about that. All that time in makeup, indeed. Shall we move on to the agenda items, colleagues? You can misbehave now, Councillor Hayden, yeah. Tasha, attend agenda item number 1.
Thanks, Chair, and apologies, you won't be able to see me at all on the cameras, so I'm just sat in the back. So under agenda item 1, there's no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Agenda item 2, there's no items which require the exclusion of the press and public. Agenda item 3, there's no formal late items today. Agenda item 4, please can I ask members to declare any interest? Under agenda item 5, apologies have been received from Councillors Taylor and McKenna, and Councillor Carlisle is here to substitute on behalf of Councillor McKenna.
Thank you very much. Right, folks, if you want to turn to page 5, and that's the minutes of our last meeting. So I'm not proposing to go through them page by page, but it's a meeting held on the 6th of July 2021. If members can have a look at them. I presume you've read them already. Are there any matters arising in somebody, are these a true record? So, Councillor Brooks.
On page 8, it said that there was going to be an affordable housing deliverability paper coming forward, but as we can see, it's not on the agenda.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Brooks. That's still in preparation, and the intent is that the intent was that it went to Executive Board in September and came to Development Plan Panel first. It's been knocked back a cycle. I understand it's now going to Executive Board in November. So it will still come to Development Plan Panel at the appropriate occasion, but there's just been a delay in it around. So and I think broadly the delays around ensuring that there's full consultation with all of the registered providers across the city to ensure that it's a consistent co-produced document.
Thank you very much for that. Just thinking on page 7, when we're discussing biodiversity, penultimate paragraph. Am I right in remembering correctly? There was a funding bid to Natural England that we were going to put in. Has there been any progress on that?
So there's 2 potential sources of funding for biodiversity net gain. One comes through new burdens funding, which we understand may be applicable to the Environment Bill. But I think because that Environment Bill hasn't been enacted yet, we still don't have any clarity on that. The second is around potential funding from Natural England for various pots of money, but further clarity isn't available on that at the moment. But just on that, it was mentioned last time that West Yorkshire authorities were commissioning some work on biodiversity net gain. That work is underway now.
Thanks for that. Right, any other matters arising? Not seeing any indications. Can somebody move the minutes as a true record? Indications, Councillor Grew and Councillor Brooks. Thank you. Right, so turning to page 11, agenda item 7. This is our local plan update on the consultation. It's your neighbourhood, your city, your planet, which is an excellent tagline. So Martin, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I will actually invite Ian Mackay to present this paper. He's been closely involved with the consultation on the local plan update.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Martin. This consultation has been around your city, your neighbourhood, your planet, as has just been mentioned. I think that's really helped us to connect with people, actually. That's certainly my experience and the experience of others who have been working on this consultation. I'm going to briefly cover 3 things in this presentation. I'm going to talk about what we've been doing, how we're doing it, and how it's going. And just to note, a consideration of the representations and the responses will take place at DPP in November. I think it's November that we're coming back with the full report. So in terms of what we've been doing, as set out in paragraph 1, what we are doing is guided by and made possible by the interim SCI, which allows us to consult online whilst COVID rates are high, but to do so while being open and inclusive. This is actually quite a tricky balance to get right at the present time. When we come to consult on the draft plan, the expectation that we will be, in a sense, getting our hands dirty, at least I hope so, when we come to consult on the draft plan, and it won't be exclusively online. And there'll be more face-to-face meetings, and I'm looking forward to that being the case, because I personally quite enjoy doing that. As you know, it's an 8-week consultation, started on the 18th of July, and has only got a few more days left, actually, finishing on the 13th. As set out in paragraph 8 of the report, there are 5 themes or indeed topics of the consultation, and I think that's helped to break down what can be fairly challenging matters for most people, and allowed people to pick and choose how they wish to take part. And experience so far has suggested that's been quite an important aspect. But also, this is a consultation that has a particular tone. And it's important to get that tone right in a scoping consultation. And I think we've got that balance just right. And by that, I mean, it's a tone which is exploratory, it's posing questions, and it's talking in terms of ideas rather than firm proposals. And most importantly, it's a listening tone. And I think that's incredibly important. But at the same time, of course, providing leadership, given the importance and the urgency of the climate challenge that we're all facing. So that balance, again, I think we've got right. But also the consultation that we've undertaken is providing choice. And I think choice is incredibly important and too often underestimated when consulting. So for those people who are familiar with the issues and in fact may well be experts on some of the issues, I think the consultation has been meaningful. But for those people where climate change may be something that they know about, they've read about, but they can't quite connect that to perhaps planning, then I think there's still something very much worthwhile to engage on. So I think it's been accessible and meaningful for all, as can be achieved online. But I think there's another feature about this consultation which has perhaps been slightly different to consultations that we've undertaken in the past, and that is flexibility and responsiveness. We've been having weekly meetings every Friday morning, in fact, reflecting on how things are going and making changes as needed. So, for example, in terms of social media reach, which postcodes in the city are responding to what we're doing, which are not responding so well, and making some tweaks as we go. And I think that's quite exciting, actually, in terms of how we do things. And I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from colleagues working in IT on how we can work more closely together in the future. So how does all this translate into practice? Although it's an online consultation, the material has been available in all formats, in libraries, in Merrion House, and of course we've offered a telephone consultation service as well. We've promoted the consultation using a variety of social media, as well as more traditional means as well. I mean, there's posters in the city centre. There isn't posters in every part of Leeds, I have to say. I think that is often the challenge. It's not so much putting the posters up, but it's about taking them down. That can be a bit of an issue. But we've tried, I think what you could describe is that we've tried a number of different techniques in this consultation. Paragraph 10 summarizes what we have done online, which is a wide range of events involving all stakeholders. Now that's via obviously the dedicated web page we have for the consultation, webinars, pre-recorded presentations. But it's really important, and I'm really conscious that as good as some of these have been, we must not leave others behind. And I think that is another thing that has become an issue during this particular consultation, and we have stepped in where we've been asked to do so to help out those people who are perhaps struggling. And just a word about targeting. That's targeting in specific areas. So we've tried to target some of the inner city communities, for example, working with Planning Aid England. I have to say that's with mixed success. That's been a particular challenge. We've done some targeting with particular groups. I think a highlight for me would be the work that we've done with Children's Services on young people, a fantastically successful workshop there. And I'm really quite proud of how that turned out. But that's not to say all of the targeting has been successful, because it hasn't. Targeting by its very nature is quite a challenging thing to do, especially online. So in terms of how has all of this gone? What have we actually achieved during this consultation? In a word, it's been fairly mixed, to be honest. We haven't had the number of representations that we would like, but experience suggests that we will get much more in the closing days of the consultation, quite often in the final few hours of the consultation. We've received 300 plus summary sheets have been completed. 80 plus topic paper questionnaires have been completed. But, and this is really interesting, as many again are part completed. Now, the hope is that those people who have part completed those forms will come back, of course, before the end of the consultation and finish them off. So if that does happen, then that's quite a healthy response, I think. Although the numbers are lower than we would like, the good news is that the consultation is reaching far and wide social media hits and advertising. And in terms of that reach, it's fairly good with the limited budget that we've had. I think we've squeezed the maximum out of that budget and reached a fairly wide audience across the city. So some of the statistics relating to that is that when people have heard about the consultation and then they've decided to go onto the website, they've been spending anything from 3 minutes to 8 or 9 minutes on each of the topic papers or indeed the summary sheets, which is far higher than most users spend on the council's other web pages. And I think that's really interesting. But we've also had over 6,000 unique page views as well. And a good level of interest in all of the topic areas, but as you would expect, some topic areas are more popular than others. Another target in terms of this consultation is making sure, as far as we possibly can, that we've heard something from every single postcode in the city. And so far we've done that. The numbers, again, are not as good as we would like. You know, some postcodes, the response has been fairly low, but we've had a response. But every area has actually responded. So I just want to make two reflections before I close. I think one of them is on the numbers. And whilst we might not have had the numbers that we would like, it's hoped that the quality of the responses will make up for that. Now, we don't know that yet. And obviously I'll come back in November and report on that. But in terms of quality, what I mean by quality is, of course, we want endorsement for what we are trying to achieve, but equally what we want constructive challenge as well. And ideally, and this would be fantastic if this happens, we have some new ideas coming forward, which could actually be recognized in the final draft plan. Now, that would be a win-win-win situation, I would suggest. And finally, it's worthwhile remembering, well, this is a formal consultation and we do want as many reps to be made as possible. It's also part of a journey where we want people to feel engaged for the duration of the process. The tone of the consultation, the awareness and the learning can all be seen as investments for the next stage of the plan making process. And in fact, for climate change awareness and action more generally in Leeds. Okay, thank you.
No, thanks for that, Ian. I'd say a good detailed and forthright appraisal. I appreciate that very much so. I think you're right. I think there'll be a rush towards the end, but and I'm hoping that there's a lot of good new ideas coming forward as well. Certainly, I know. Well, quite a few people I know in this, if you like the climate aware ecosystem of people in Leeds are currently doing consultation responses, so I think there'll be some coming in. So I've got a couple of councillors who want to question our speaker. So Councillor Collins and Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. Ian, why are we still on the interim statement of community involvement, which I understand is quite a short document, when the final proper document, the statement of community involvement, is just on the horizon, and I believe is late for release. So that's my first question. And the second one is, if we do have a full document statement of community involvement on the horizon, is there anything in there that is different to what you've actually done recently with this consultation?
I think if I remember correctly, the interim SCI was adopted at this panel in December. And of course, that was adopted to allow us to undertake plan making activity during the COVID pandemic. And basically, in a nutshell, it means that we can continue with the work that we're doing online. That's the main reason. But in terms of difference, apart from going out and, as I said earlier in the presentation, getting your hands dirty, everything else is pretty much the same. And we are looking to come back fairly soon to this panel with the full SCI. But I think there's another opportunity here as well, and that is to reflect on how this consultation has gone and actually to make adjustments to that SCI, because I don't think the full SCI that we've got waiting in the wings is perfect. I think we can take that full draft SCI, bring it back to this panel with reflections on this consultation and to seek your approval to improve what we've already got.
So can you just confirm then? So the missing elements that you're going through at the moment, compared to what the full SCI will be, the missing elements are down to the fact that we'd be limited because of COVID, are they?
Correct. That's the main reason. Yeah. I mean, I mean, we're still doing a lot of things in this consultation that we're doing more than we need to do. For example, we've done 8 weeks of consultation rather than 6. So it's not that we're limiting. I think we're being smarter. I think we're being more creative, and I think we're being reflective as well. And I think, as I said during the presentation, I think the thing that's most notable in this consultation is the tone. And I think it's the tone that's perhaps the most important thing, especially given the topic that we are consulting on. But we will be back. There is, as I say, a full document waiting in the wings. And as I'm sure that most people would say, we can have the words in the SCI that are saying all of the right things, but what really matters is action and what we're actually doing. And I think in terms of action and what we're actually doing, we've demonstrated in the past few weeks that we are doing the right things as far as we possibly can under the restrictions that we are placed with.
Councillor Anderson.
Right, a number of comments. Start off with a positive. I'm one of the sickos who attended the webinars and attended them all, I think, as far as I am aware. The timings were good. You know, the ones that were on during the day and at night, I think that did work. Okay, there wasn't great attendance. But what I would say is that the quality of the presentations, without exception, were actually very good in all cases. And in some cases, I even emailed back the relevant person to point out that it was well presented. So from that point of view, I think we got it right, you know, in terms of the quality of the presentations. On the more negative side, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I did ask prior to, could you send me the materials and could you send me the presentation notes so that I can go out and do some work in my area? No. I got the slides, but hard copies of the materials so that they could be sent out so that we could, I asked for them, I didn't get them, I was promised that they would come, but we never did. So maybe we could learn about getting the information out, not just to me as a councillor, but everybody else as a councillor as well, getting the information out there. In terms of the ISCI, I think we should maybe spend half a session sometime actually reflecting back on what worked and what didn't work and what needs to be changed, because there is a lot of ill feeling out there about ISCI, particularly in the neighbourhood forums and particularly in some parish councils who feel that things haven't been done properly. I would have thought, though, that when we saw that the weather was actually quite good, why could we not come up with an alternative flexibility and take some officers outside of some of the supermarkets to stand out there and explain to people about it? Standing outside, so there was no need to go inside, so there was nobody being put at risk. You know, when the weather was coming good, why did we not utilize that time to actually go out and do something and try and generate more people back again. It might have been better if we'd been able to engineer some sort of social media debates on some of the issues to actually stimulate it. You know, having different opinions being put out there and getting a debate going. And also one thing I personally would have liked is, and I know I could have done it myself, I fully accept that, is the links to the YouTube presentations, the webinars, because we could have then put those in the public domain to see if people would bite in on some of them and then maybe get some responses. So, you know, overall, you know, yes, could it have been done better? Yes, I think everybody would say that it could have been done better. But hopefully, as well as being critical, I've tried to give positive comments where necessary and also some suggestions as to how it might be done to improve in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Candice Anderson. Martin, Ian, who wants to respond to Councillor Anderson's points? Ian, to start with.
I mean, I think these are all good points, actually. I mean, I think in terms of the supermarket point, I did do a little bit, I did start to do that, but maybe I started to do that too early because there wasn't a great deal of appetite from the supermarkets to do that. And that coupled with officers with different levels of COVID risk, shall I put, if I can put it that way, or COVID sensitivity. Matching those two things up together is actually quite a challenge to do, but I do accept the broader point, and it's certainly something that when we come to consult on the draft document, I absolutely agree. I mean, the point about neighbourhood forums and the SCI or the ISCI, I'm part familiar with that, but I think one of the things that which I'm keen to do is to, and we're currently drafting this, and it's a neighbourhood planning protocol about how the four neighbourhood planning groups engage, not just in terms of the SCI, but engage with planning more generally. And it's about, and it's a bit about roles and responsibilities, that actually it's not just about what the service does, but it's actually about the responsibilities of the groups too. And it's supposed to be a constructive document that we prepare together. So hopefully some of those concerns might actually be resolved by this simple document actually. So I'm hopeful. So perhaps we could have a discussion about that another time. In terms of the social media debate, I personally, I don't know what others think, but I agree with that point. I agree with the webinars. I thought were really good, and I thought the presentations were really good. But I also felt that perhaps they could have been, in some cases, a little bit more provocative to encourage people to perhaps get involved in that debate. But of course, that's a challenge in itself, isn't it? So again, I don't know, but I think that is something that I did actually feel myself, but that's not to take away from the success of the webinars, which I thought was really good. I just wish more people could have benefited from those. And in terms of the YouTube channel, I think one of the lessons to be learned for the next stage of the consultation is to actually promote better the stuff that we've got, because we do have a lot of good stuff, and I don't think we actually promoted all of that as well as we could have done.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ian. I think social media debates are interesting, Barry. Perhaps we could block out some diary time to debate on Twitter with tinfoil-hatted loons about the realities of climate change. But no, but I think it's an interesting idea, and we'll have further discussions when we get to like draft policy consultation, because that'll be interesting to see what people come back with. But we've got to find a sensible and structured way of doing that sort of is a genuine discussions about what's the best policy going forward, rather than us wasting our time talking to the tinfoil hat brigade who think climate emergency is all a Chinese communist plot, because I'm not wasting my time debating with lunatics. But we do need a way to take that forward. I agree. Right. Is any other comments? By all means. By all means. Is that Councillor Brooks and then Councillor Hayden?
Thanks, Chair. Ian, on page 12, it says the concerted effort will be made in the closing week to connect with and hear from all communities across the city, particularly those where you've identified gaps. Where are the identified gaps and how are you going to approach that?
I think there's a number of gaps there. I think one of them is certainly some of the inner city communities. Probably the main one. We did put a lot of time and effort into working with Planning Aid England on workshops, which were going to be independently chaired for inner city areas, but we didn't get the response that we wanted. On reflection there, I think the reason for that is that we're not proactive enough in, I think it's one thing sending out an email telling people that this event is taking place, but that really needs to be followed up by a phone call or some kind of personal connection. And I think we could have done a little bit more there, but it's mainly with inner city groups in particular. So one of the things that I actually had a meeting with Planning Aid England yesterday morning about this very subject. And there's two things that we're looking to do. One of them is to not do an event with individual neighbourhood planning groups that represent inner city areas, but to try and bring them together for one session towards the end of the year. So that is one gap. And to make it not exclusive to neighbourhood planning groups, to make it open to others to join as well. And that might actually have the added benefit of getting more people involved in neighbourhood planning. You never know. And then the other thing is with young people, I think the event that we had with Children's Services was fantastic. But in terms of that was 12 to 17, if I remember correctly, and it really was good. But in terms of the older age group, I think that's probably the area of the consultation that was the weakest, surprisingly. Now, we have to wait to see when we've got all of the representations in to actually check to see who's actually responded. But it would suggest at the moment that it hasn't been as strong from younger people in the, say, 18 to 30 age group as we would have expected, given what we're consulting on. So we are going to do some more work there with Planning Aid, and I'm sure there's other things that we can do. But upon reflecting on that yesterday, I think probably the situation is, until we have something tangible to actually consult on, something which is, we're proposing to do this, what do you think? I think some groups perhaps find it hard to connect with ideas. Some people are better with ideas than others, and that's my sense. Once we've got a tangible plan, a draft plan to consult on, I think it's going to be easier for a number of groups to be involved.
Thanks, Ian. So I suppose like, did you run anything by ward members for recommendations as to active local groups that may be interested in this kind of thing? And also, did you get in touch with educational establishments, colleges, universities, primary schools and high schools? Because then you'd get the full range of different age ranges for the younger demographic. Plus we've got various groups for like older people in the inner areas. So did you seek any advice from ward members as to how to approach the population?
I wouldn't quite put it that we did it that way. What we did is certainly in terms of ward members that represent inner city wards, we advised them what was taking place in terms of the webinars and other things. It was less about asking for advice about who to consult or how to consult. It was more about, this is what we're doing. Could you promote through your channels? And we had a fairly good response from ward members in that respect. I think one of the things that did come back from that was actually, rather than sending an email, rather than ward members sending an email on behalf of the service to your community contacts, it would be better to have a short video, or even, you know, something which was perhaps a colourful poster or a cartoon or something like that, something which you quickly capture the attention and the imagination. And I think that's actually a really interesting point, and something that we can look at. And then in terms of education, we probably haven't done as much work with schools as I would have liked. And I think timing is an issue there, of course, but I think we've made up for that with the things that we have done, and have done them well. In terms of education, I think we've been pretty good in that respect. I've had quite good engagement with Leeds University and Leeds Beckett. Again, the issue there in terms of having something coming back is purely one of timing, but Leeds Beckett have a couple of events lined up for the early part of this month with some of the new students, and I'm hoping that will reach back to us. And then finally, there is the Leeds Student Forum has 50,000 users, and I've had a placement student with us for a short period of time, and he's been promoting the consultation on that forum. It's difficult to judge what effect that has had, but it's certainly got a big reach, that particular forum.
What was who sent the email to invite people, to invite ward members to the sessions? Because I can't find it.
I'll have to check who that was, but I think that was sent probably 4 to 6 weeks ago. And I think it would have been more than one. We certainly had responses from some inner city ward members on that. So it's clearly gone out, and had a fair bit of response from, for example, Little Woodhouse Neighbourhood Forum and others from that email. So I'll check and I'll let you know. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Councillor Hayden.
I just want to, because I'm remembering back to the meeting when we discussed this first, and Councillor Gruen and myself were particularly anxious that the younger population were consulted. Obviously, it's over the summer holiday, so it's been difficult to get into schools, but I just want to say thanks for the excellent the way that the Have a Voice council has been, and the webinar that sounds like it went extremely well. So, and they represent other young people. There might be a small amount of them, but they're representative of young people throughout the city. So yeah, it's really good to get their views in such a, well, I'll say face to face, it will have been on a camera, won't it? So yeah.
Councillor Carlisle.
Thanks, Chair. Follows on from Councillor Brooks' point a little bit, because we've been doing some consultations in the transport side of it as well, especially around the areas of the active travel neighbourhoods. And on that, we've been engaging with organisations such as Leeds Involving People to, rather than find people who are interested in planning, which unfortunately among the younger generation, you may find that there's not as many of them as we might like to see out there. They've been in conversation with communities that we've been working with, finding people that are vocal or are important representatives of their communities, and then organising small focus groups around there. I think the idea of just trying to find the views of that community, and what they've helped us with, I think, is rephrasing the questions so that the questions that people do want to answer rather than the ones we might necessarily want answering. I just wondered whether any of that work was gone on, or maybe you could have a chat with some of the Connecting Leeds team around what they've done there, and it might be that that could tie up and we could learn from both.
I think that's a really good point, and it has been on my radar. I'm afraid to say we haven't done as much as I would have liked. It's related to one of the ideas that I have, and one of the things that I've tried to do a little bit, and that's to have an ambassador for the consultation, people within the community who are actually going to help put up posters or to connect with people or to publicize, etc. That can actually be extremely effective, and it's related, I think, to the point you're making. But yeah, in terms of connecting leads, we did look at what worked well on the connecting leads consultation, and there was a lot of good work done during that. And we did, I think we probably pinched a few of their ideas actually. But yeah, really good point. We haven't done as much as we would have liked in that area. And I really do think that's going to become even more important in the future and to be looked at very closely for the next round in consultation. Thank you.
Last one, and then going to get Mr. Elliott to wrap up. So it's just Councillor Collins and then Martin to wrap.
Thank you, Chair. And it's just a plea really to, and this applies to all departments, and not just on this planning issue, is to try and use our website better. I mean, quite often I know something is on the website, but it takes me 3 or 4 attempts to actually track it down, because you've got to think of the sensible keywords to put in there. And just as an example, I've just typed in local plan under the search engine, and the first thing that comes up is the adopted local plan page, which I've clicked on. And it's got useful information there, but there's absolutely nothing about proposed changes and a consultation ongoing at the moment. So it's a plea really to look at the network of links within our website to see whether additional ones need to be put in temporarily, or even sometimes you need backlinks. So you might end up on one web page but not be able to find out where that information had come from originally. So so it's just a plea really that somebody actually looks at the structure of our website and the web pages that are relevant, to see when you're doing these consultations that other web pages can actually promote that there's some work going on.
The good news though, Councillor Collins, is if you put Leeds local plan review into Google, it's the first hit is Ian's page. So that's,
yeah, but how many people know to put that in?
if they're looking for local plan review, probably quite a few to look to Google. Yes, we always look at how the internal website works. Martin, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. And just on Councillor Collins's point, we did work really closely with our IT colleagues to really present a radically different web experience for this local plan update. And it was radically different because it had embedded videos, because it had a lot of color, because it was very simply laid out, because it wasn't reliant on subsequent links to PDFs. And I think the council's shift in terms of making its online content more accessible really was testament to a very good website. I mean, I'm really proud of the website, and I've had really good feedback on it. And it should be quite high up the
when you
search
get to the
results.
web page itself. It is good, I agree.
Yeah.
And well done for that. But all I'm saying is there are other web pages within the council framework that could have linked you to that.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Collins. And in terms of the social media, which Ian mentioned, and I think you did mention it, Ian, but just so that members are very clear, that was analysed on a week-by-week basis to look at where age groups and parts of the city weren't responding, and then tailoring that advertisement to fit in with the types of websites that they would look at, that they're known to be looking at in particular parts of the city and for particular age groups. So I will say, and Ian's been very honest with you today about the process, but I will say that there were very new consultative approaches being used here to deal with the limitations of the pandemic and the interim statement of community involvement. And I think in terms of the creativity, in terms of the language, and in terms of the dedicated reach of that material, those are things that are here to stay now. Because I think we've gone further through that digital consultation than we may even have gone if we'd gone out to parish councils and gone to the town hall and run an event and ask people to step in. I suppose the only point I would say is this isn't unusual for this stage of plan making. As Ian said, it's often quite high level for people to engage. We do find that people tend to engage more when there's something specific in front of them. And what we're working on now is to how we relate specific policies that we'll follow from this consultation to what that means for where I live. So actually, how do all these policies come together to influence the shape and look and style and location of where future development in particular parts of the city will be? What implications has it got for the green spaces near where you live, etc. So we're really keen that in the next stage where we've got more detail and we maybe have more debate, we can promote it in that way and hang on to the good things that we learned through this process, as well as improve on some of the gaps, given the resources that we have available to us. Thank you.
Yeah. Very fair comment. And Councillor Anderson, you look poised. Did you want to come back on something? Yeah. Do you
On reflection, was holding an event during the summer period, actually, I know there are reasons why, but I think that's been one of the problems, is holding it over, because even if you had wanted to go out and have meetings, there is a proportion of staff who are going to be on holiday during that time for a start, irrespective of anybody else. You're going to have people missed out because they've been on holiday. So maybe in future, we maybe need to think not to run anything during the summer period, because I think, in fairness, I think that's been one of your problems. But that came about because of other circumstances. I accept that, but on reflection, I do think, well, I think summer was not the best time to hold it.
Yeah.
Ordinarily, I would agree with you, because, you know, when a health scrutiny, I didn't like consultations that went over the summer, you know, but this summer we've not been able to get away, have we? In the same numbers that we normally would. So maybe there were more people online, you know, looking for things to occupy their time. this summer.
It was just to add, Chair, I mean, I take Councillor Anderson's point, and it's always difficult, isn't it, the timing of consultation. I think we were very mindful of this panel's commitment to the local plan update process in terms of the climate emergency and the need for urgency. And I think if we'd have waited until the end of the summer into the autumn, then we would have missed a whole chunk of time. I think to compensate for the summer period, we have extended the consultation into September, the first 2 weeks of September. So hopefully that overlap, and as Ian has said, will allow some further consultation to come in. And frankly, it's not the end of it, is it? After the 13th of September, if there are still comments that people want to make, that can be fed into the process. So, you know, we have to start somewhere and manage our resources effectively and try new things. I think there's some things to take away, but a whole host of very positive things that have happened. Thank you.
Yep. All right, folks, going to close that item off, and we're going to move. I'm conscious of time, so we're going to move quickly on to our next item, which is the revised National Planning Policy Framework and National Model Design Code, July 2021, which is quite a mouthful. So, Sarah, do you want to go for it?
I'll have a go. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. The revised NPPF and National Model Design Code and Guidance was issued on the 20th of July 2020, this year. Got the right year for a change, and are now live documents in both the plan making and decision making process. The report in front of you details the full key changes per chapter, but I shall try and I've tried to pick out what I think the key points are and themes that are running through it. The revised documents are a result of the Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission, Living with Beauty report, which was informed the changes to the NPPF, which were consulted on in January 2021 this year, and we brought it to March Development Plans Panel. And also the Government White Paper Planning for the Future, which was issued in 2020, and the direction of travel in which the government is going with regard to planning. There is very little change from the NPPF consultation document to what the published document is now. To note, this is not a fully revised NPPF, only what formed part of the consultation, and we are expecting over time more revisions, which will obviously be brought back to you. The presumption in favour of sustainable development still remains at the heart of the NPPF, and this has now included the 17 global goals for sustainable development. I think the key themes that run through the whole paper is the emphasis on beauty, good design, placemaking, patterns of development and areas, not just a site or a building. However, beauty is not being defined in the NPPF, therefore opening this up to debate. Design codes and area assessments are now a requirement for the local planning authorities and to be undertaken, and taking into account the National Model Design Code and National Design Guidance. And importantly, coming out of this, development that is not well designed should be refused, especially where this is not in line with national and local design policies and codes. Article 4, this is an area we raised significant concerns about in our consultation response. Obviously, it's linking to the new use class order and new permitted development rights. They have tweaked the text slightly to include viability and vitality of centres, but we still have concerns about this with regard to time and resource required to deliver it, especially if they're taking 18 months, 2 years in which to be delivered. That will, PD rights can still be implemented. Emphasis on the contribution of trees is not just about the character of area, but also about helping and mitigating climate change has been incorporated. Pedestrian cycle routes should be attractive and well designed, and also open spaces are beneficial to nature, also linking to placemaking. Delivering land for homes, neighbourhood planning groups now should give particular consideration for allocating small and medium sites, so not as restricted as it indicated in the consultation. With regard to large scale developments, they now should be supported by genuine choices of transport modes. With regard to flood risk, the text now requires a sequential test to take into account all sources of flood risk, and that local planning authorities apply natural flood management techniques through an integrated approach to determine whether or not a development is appropriately resilient and can be brought back into use quickly with little refurbishment and work required. The key area regarding flood risk is that the flood risk vulnerability classification is now in the annex of the NPPF, which was previously in the National Planning Guidance, therefore giving it much more weight. Previous concerns about the practicalities of this and need for guidance on how this should be taken into account when assessing flood risk assessments has not been provided to date. There are some changes to the annexes in the document, which are noted in the report. The National Model Design Code was issued at the same time as the NPPF, with guidance notes for design codes, and is referred to throughout the NPPF. Leeds was successful with its bid to be a pilot authority. Little has changed since the consultation, and this will be discussed further with you at the workshop that follows this agenda item. To conclude, we are generally supportive of the changes, the emphasis changes, and in the emphasis and increased focus on design, climate change, biodiversity, and overall placemaking. This is in line with the direction of Leeds City Council with the declaration of the climate emergency and through the local plan updates, and therefore lends further support to our approach. However, a lack of clarity around definitions of beauty, the application of Article 4's and its impact on town and local centres, and new guidance on flood risk remain problematic to us. Clearly, there are wider planning reforms coming forward and are still awaited, and this is likely to result in further changes, which we will, as I stated earlier, bring back to Plans Panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Right. A couple of questions myself, but rather than go to the chairs, but to colleagues, and then if you, Councillor Anderson, and then I'll now pick up some up.
What training and updating has been given to DC officers so that they can understand it? Because when I've mentioned, for example, that when I first heard about the use of codes, I got blank looks from a lot of planners when I raised it and pointed out that it had been a senior, it was David, what's his name, from David Newbury, that brought it to our attention, and some of his colleagues were oblivious of the fact that this had actually happened. So are we now satisfied that all DC officers are aware of all of these changes and that they should be reflecting that in the reports that they are about to write?
I don't mind taking this one. Do you want to go, David?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I'll certainly take that away and speak to Jonathan Carr, Head of Development Management. I mean, as with everybody else, we've had a flurry of changes, haven't we, to the planning system in recent weeks and months, but certainly on this particular agenda in terms of designing the importance of that, I'll make sure that's taken away and I'll raise that with the team. Thank you.
Councillor Gruen.
Thank you. Sarah, the areas that you listed as still being of concern to us, where do we go with that now? Do we just have to accept that, or what powers do we have to I think you said open up for debate on the word beauty? Yeah, there are some issues here that we're not happy with. What can we do about that at this stage?
Well, it's a live document now. It's the live MPPF in which we take into consideration when determining planning applications, pre-applications and policy making, plan making. So I think we have to try our best to work with what we have, and obviously things going forward, we can put some things hopefully in the local plan updates. And obviously got one, but there are obviously more to come over time. I think Martin may want to add some points.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I mean, I think we're just drawing attention to members as to the sort of the gap between the aspirations we had when, you know, and this group sent comments back to government. And some of it, I think we can be positive about. So I think the reflection of the Sustainable Development Goals, the prominence given to sort of climate change, albeit that the document says seek to mitigate climate change, not absolutely mitigate climate change, which is, I think, is a debate we had. But I think this is all about taking the MPPF as a starting point when we then look at future iterations of development plan update. But on things like the permitted development rights and the Article 4 directions, that's a very clear line in the sand that government are setting. So it does have implications for if we were to do any further work on that, which I know there's been an appetite from some members to do, it is going to be more difficult. Not impossible, but a lot more difficult and resource intensive.
Now, I don't know how colleagues feel, but I still feel committed to wanting to do work on that and at least help ourselves understand how Leeds is going to interpret some of those areas that A, we're not happy with, and B, are actually still quite unclear.
I agree. I think we do need to do that. I mean, MPPF's a starting point, isn't it? It doesn't preclude us from going further in policy areas, but it is the sort of the baseline, as it were. There is quite a lot of creative ambiguity in all of this, which it's unclear, but if it's unclear, then we've got room for maneuver. We need to maximize that, whether with respect to climate emergency, affordable housing, placemaking, design. Yeah, and we do need to take a Leeds approach. We certainly do. I think there's some cause for optimism in that. I think we might have more. So that's in terms of like setting policy. That's all to the good. Where it's going to get a bit more messy, shall we say, is about considerations of design and beauty. How does one define that? You know, I mean, one person's brutalist nightmare is another person's work of art. You know, I mean, I don't like beige brick, Metroland kind of homogeneity, but some people clearly do. The debate goes on and on and on, Martin. How do we go forward with that? Just thinking, particularly from the perspective of officers and councillors who are going to be on plans panels, are going to have to be making these kind of judgment calls on a weekly basis.
I think there's two things. I think we need to look at the tools we already have around beauty, and we're lucky in that we've got design guidance, and we can talk about that next, actually, when we get on to the workshop, because we've got neighbourhoods for living, which we could say sets out what the council thinks beauty looks like in the city. And what these MPPF changes do is allow us to place greater weight on that when it comes to determining planning applications, whereas in the past, we found it's often been numbers of houses with the absence of a 5-year supply, for example, that takes all the weight. That's shifted now, and I think we've got the coverage from the MPPF on that. But then as we look at local plan updates, both from the climate change perspective and placemaking perspective and beyond, what new local policies do we want to create to take on points like beauty, for example?
Sorry, folks, you could argue that in the design stuff that we've already set out, we've kind of established where we think that lies, you know, and so we've got a point, we've got our own baseline to go from there anyway. Councillor Brooks, then Councillor Lamb.
where do you sit, Martin, on the making effective use of land? Because you're saying about, you know, we were sort of tied to this 5-year land supply stuff, but then the saying about making effective use of land here instead, which could potentially cause issues in areas where there's already a strain on various different services, as well as like transport networks and things. So how is that going to fold in?
So at the moment, within the current core strategy that we have, we've got policy SP1, which talks about the majority of development being focused on the main urban area and the city centre, which is where most of the jobs are, which is where most of the existing transport links are, to maximise that infrastructure and make the best of brownfield land. We're also exploring through the local plan update, though, as to whether there are environmental limits to these parts of the city, to things like overheating and the urban heat effect, and where in terms of climate change adaptation, we know that actually the city's going to feel the increase in temperatures far more acutely within the main urban area than it is elsewhere, which is, but we've also got an approach to 20-minute neighbourhoods that we're running through the local plan update as well, which talks about the effective use of land. So I think it's still an important topic for us to consider. We've got a position set within the adopted plan already, which will be in line with what the NPPF says, but it'll be something for us to consider in due course as we go down the local plan update and any future iterations of the local plan, and taking into account the inner areas and the importance of place and space and trees and green space will be important to that.
Sorry, Chair. I wasn't talking necessarily just about town and city centre sites. I'm also talking about, like, you know, the more sort of greenfield type sites where it may be that they're wanting to shoehorn in loads more housing that locally wouldn't necessarily be able to absorb that amount of extra population. So like, because you were saying that, like, before, when we're working with a set amount of numbers, like for the 5 years, that we were just being walloped by that. Is there any reason that we won't be walloped by this in the same way? That's what I'm asking.
So this document still retains as a prime objective to meet identified housing needs. That sits very much at the top of the NPPF, and it remains one of the tests of soundness, which is around meeting objectively assessed needs. So I think that one of the points we made back to government was that that needs to be tempered by things like climate emergency design placemaking, because those might be reasons as to why you can't meet the top of your overall housing needs. So we'll have to still have that debate and look at local evidence as to where the most appropriate parts of the city are in terms of where that housing is delivered. For now, a lot of that's focused in the main urban area in the city centre, that's the position we have, and we have a very healthy 5-year housing land supply. But the next plan period, we'll have to look at where housing over the next 16 years is, and what those numbers are, including the 35% housing uplift that government wants us to meet as well.
Well, that'll be fun for everybody. I think that just before I bring Councillor Lamb in, I think a fundamental question for us is: do all these changes make it easier for us to place make, and particularly if you cast your mind back, colleagues, to when we've had inquiries over this happened, that will it make it easier to bring together local services in a cohesive and sensible manner? Don't think the NPPF's there yet at all. And when you think of the problems that health and education colleagues have in helping us out in that regard, I think that's still a glaring omission in the UK planning system as it's presently configured. And they've not seen anything yet to change my mind on that. But we'll keep battling away with CLG over that. Right, Councillor Lamb, and then Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Chair. One thing that strikes me about this is how do we make it actually accessible to people? Because even for those of us that are immersed in this stuff, you read it and you still get to know, right, what does that actually mean in practical terms? when there's a planning application to consider, what does it mean? And I don't know how, but if there's a way that we could produce a 1-minute guide, 1 page, this is what's changed and this is what it means in practice, not just for our benefit, but for all panel members, for officers, for members of the public, for developers, to actually be able to see at a glance, right, I can get what it means. If I'm submitting an application, considering it, I want to comment on it, I can see easily what's changed. And it's not down to us, but we have to deal with it. I wonder if there's a way we could get somebody to have a look and say, right, this is a simple way, not just for this change, but for future changes, that we have a template that says this is what it was before, this is what it is now, and this is what it would mean in practical terms. Because I've got a reasonable grasp of this, but even so, I still, right, there's a bit of chin scratching going on. So,
when members of the public ask you, or it's raised at a community forum, and you know, they look at you as if you are the font of all knowledge, to have something like that to use in that context would be very, very useful.
I'm looking at our head of engagement and our chief planning officer and Sarah there, just to see what you think. Yeah.
So part of the remit of me going through, obviously updating you on the NPPF, is to provide, which links back to Councillor Anderson's point about it is actually, we're just in the process of creating a cheat sheet, I suppose it's the right thing to call it, of what's changed. And obviously maybe we can add a bit on to add a further section on to make it as simple as possible. Present, what was the 2019, what was 2021, and what the implications are in a sort of quick view table. And we'll go, that's what I plan to do, but we'll make that available. And so we can do that. But yeah, that's part of the remit, to explain NPPF as best we can so far.
That's one of the labors of Hercules, but well done, Sarah, for taking that one on. Right, do we have any other? Oh, Councillor Collins.
Just a quick one, I think, really. When it comes to these definitions of beauty and placemaking and everything, could we not ask the School of Architecture, what do they actually teach? Because they must have something that they give their students, some guidelines as to what they think they should incorporate in designs and what they shouldn't put in designs. Isn't that an opportunity for us to just get their overview on it?
Oh, now whenever Councillor Collins goes, I've got this really short point to make, and what she means is I'm just going to leave her open this massive can of worms at the end of the item and just throw it into the middle of the room. We'll make a note of this, right, and we'll ask them what they think and see if there's something they can send to us as a panel for us to look at. Why the heck not? But we'll also extend an invite, and we'll see if they want to come along and talk to us, and maybe show some films or slides of what they think is cool, because look, everyone likes looking inside houses, don't they, really? So come on, everyone likes grand designs, and we all like looking at these kind of things, but it's also got, it's about building, it's also about neighborhood and place building, isn't it, as well? So, you know, and that is a very, very subjective subject. There's a subjective subject, brilliant sentence, Neil, but it is, isn't it? It's one person's masterpiece is another person's wasteland. So we'll see what they come up with. Councillor Brooks.
While you're at it, you may as well also invite some philosopher students to discuss what beauty is over the various different centuries. Anyway, yes.
Yeah, because well, why not? I mean, because no one seriously believes that when we look back at buildings from periods that we don't think were great periods of design, nobody in those periods was going out of their way to produce a terrible building. Although the Merrion Centre might be an exception to this, I'm not sure. I was going to say, as long as you want the Architect Council ahead, and that'll be fine. You know, no one can get hurt. But yeah, we'll do that, and we'll see if they can come along. So, School of Architecture at the uni, yeah, yep. Martin. And the philosophy department, yes. Mr. Elliott's going to bring a moment of sanity to the end of this item. So,
I mean, I would also say that we are fortunate in that we've got qualified architects and urban designers working for us and advising you as panel members. And I think the main thing to take away from this is it's less about defining what beauty is and more about the prominence of good design that's related to local circumstances and local character of areas across the city. And I think that what you'll find as panel members is that this NPPF will help you should you wish to place more weight on that aspect of a planning application than on others. I think trying to find a what's Leeds beauty is well, and I think it's really interesting, and I think as we explore things like the model design code and how we implement that and how we draw up new design codes, I think that's a really good debate to have with the School of Architecture and others. So I would endorse that.
I think we could learn a lot from understanding how to separate personal taste from elements of beauty or good design. I think that's the sort of trick of doing it properly, because, you know, brutalist architecture might be somebody's taste, but it fulfills certain proportions and lines, which I understand our architectural advice admires.
We're now discussing Kant's sublime theory. We've reached that point, have we? Right. I think that's brought this item to a gentle, natural close. So what we're going to do is we'll finish closing DPP now. We're going to have a 5-minute break, and then we'll get straight on with the workshop. So we're well ahead of our schedule, if that's all right, folks. So reconvene at like 5 to, more or less. And then Tash, if you could